Imagine walking into a crowded CAF, a hum of conversation broken by the sharp laughter of a group seated near the window. Their voices rise as they point and whisper, their focus fixed on a quiet man sitting alone. His hands tremble slightly as he reaches for his coffee, his movements deliberate. He's different, and they can't seem to let it go. Their jokes cut through the air like knives, but he doesn't react. Instead, he keeps his head down, a faint smile on his face like he knows something they don't. The man's wheelchair doesn't define him, but to them, it's all they see. What's he even doing here? One of them sneers. Bet he's never done anything important in his life. They laugh louder, their mocking words sharp enough to draw the attention of the entire CAF. And yet, the man stays calm, his quiet confidence unshaken. But then, just as their taunts reach a peak, something incredible happens. The man slowly pulls out a small, velvet box from his pocket. The room falls silent as he opens it to reveal a gleaming Medal of Honor, the highest military distinction in the nation. The bullies freeze, their smug grins wiped away as the truth hits them like a thunderclap. What could this man's story be? What battles has he fought, and what sacrifices has he made to earn such an honor? Stay tuned to find out how this hero's extraordinary journey silences his critics and inspires everyone around him. The CAF was so silent you could hear a pin drop. The gleam of the Medal of Honor seemed to cast a glow that reached every corner of the room, forcing everyone to confront their earlier judgments. The man, his weathered hands holding the box, looked up for the first time. His eyes were calm but carried a weight that hinted at untold stories, battles, and sacrifices. The group of bullies, once so loud and confident, now sat frozen, their faces a mix of embarrassment and confusion. One of them, the boldest of the group, finally broke the silence. "What's that supposed to prove?" he asked, though his voice wavered. "Just because you've got some shiny metal doesn't mean. It doesn't mean I matter?" The man interrupted, his voice firm but not angry. "That's what you were going to say, wasn't it?" The leader of the group faltered, unable to respond. The man closed the box slowly, tucking it back into his jacket. He didn't look angry. In fact, there was something unsettling about how calm he remained. It was as though he had heard worse, much worse, and their words couldn't touch him. "I didn't get this medal for being special or important," the man continued, his voice carrying the weight of years. "I got it because I made choices that most people wouldn't. Choices that cost me more than you can imagine. Do you want to know what those choices were?" The question hung in the air. The group exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of what to do. They hadn't expected a confrontation like this, much less one that made them feel so small. "You don't have to tell us anything," one of them mumbled, clearly wanting to escape the situation. But the man wasn't finished. "I think you should hear it," he said. "Because if you don't understand why someone like me might end up in a wheelchair, you'll keep laughing at people like me. And maybe next time, the person you laugh at won't have a medal to show you. Maybe they'll just carry that hurt with them." The tension in the room was almost unbearable. The CAF staff stood behind the counter, watching in stunned silence. A few patrons leaned in closer, their curiosity piqued. The man leaned back slightly, his eyes narrowing as though he were peering into a distant memory. "I was 22 when I joined the military," he began. "I wasn't much different from you back then. I thought I was invincible, that nothing could touch me. But war doesn't care how young or confident you are. It breaks everyone." He paused, his hands resting on the arms of his wheelchair. For a moment, it seemed like he might stop, but then he pressed on. "I was deployed to a place you probably couldn't find on a map. Our mission was dangerous, but we believed in what we were doing. One day, we were ambushed. Trapped in enemy territory, outnumbered, and with no backup. I had a choice: run and save myself or stay and protect the others. I stayed." The leader of the group shifted uncomfortably. "So, what happened?" he asked, his bravado gone. "I took a hit," the man said simply. "A landmine. Lost both my legs, nearly bled out before they got to me. But the others? They lived. That's why I have this medal. It's not for surviving. It's for making sure others did. The room felt heavy with his words. The bullies sat in stunned silence, their earlier arrogance replaced by shame. But the man wasn't done. You think my wheelchair makes me weak? He asked, his tone sharp. You think it means my life is less than yours? Let me tell you something: strength isn't about standing tall or looking a certain way. Strength is doing the right thing, even when it costs you everything. The leader of the bullies opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. His friends avoided eye contact, their faces pale. The man's story had left them speechless, but it had also left them uncomfortable. They couldn't undo their laughter or their cruel words. The man glanced at his watch, then reached for his coffee. I didn't tell you this to make you feel bad, he said, his tone softening. I told you because I hope next time you see someone different, you'll think twice before judging them. You don't know their story. You don't know their strength. With that, he took a sip of his coffee and turned back to the window, as though the conversation had never happened. The bullies sat frozen for a moment longer before one of them muttered, "We should go." They left in silence, their earlier confidence shattered. But even as they walked away, the man's words stayed with them, lingering like an echo they couldn't escape. And for the rest of the CAF, the quiet hero who had been mocked only moments before became a symbol of resilience and dignity, a reminder that true strength isn't always visible on the surface. As the group of bullies left the CAF, their silence was heavier than any words they could have spoken. Each of them wrestled with their own thoughts, haunted by the man's story and the raw truth in his words. They had come into the CAF with the intention of having fun at someone else's expense, but they left with a weight they couldn't shake. None of them spoke as they walked down the street, their laughter from earlier now a distant memory. Inside the CAF, the man continued sipping his coffee, his gaze fixed on the world outside the window. The tension that had filled the room began to dissipate, replaced by something more profound: a quiet respect for the man who had just shared a piece of his soul. One of the baristas, a young woman who had been watching the entire interaction, hesitated before approaching his table. "Excuse me," she said softly, her hands nervously clutching a dishcloth. "I just wanted to say thank you for sharing your story. That was incredible." The man looked up at her, his expression softening. "Thank you," he replied. "I didn't mean to make a scene. I just thought they needed to hear it." "You didn't make a scene," she said quickly. "You made an impact. I think everyone here learned something today." The man offered her a small, grateful smile before returning his attention to his coffee. Other patrons began to resume their conversations, though many glanced his way with a newfound sense of admiration. The atmosphere in the CAF had shifted, the air now filled with quiet reflection. As the day went on, the man's story began to ripple through the community. Word spread quickly about the veteran who had silenced a group of bullies with his Medal of Honor and his courage. People who had been in the CAF shared what they had witnessed with friends and family, and soon, the story was being retold in homes, schools, and workplaces. Meanwhile, the bullies found themselves grappling with the aftermath of their actions. For the first time, they were forced to confront the impact of their words and the harm they had caused. The leader of the group, the one who had mocked the man the loudest, couldn't shake the image of the Medal of Honor or the weight of the man's story. That night, as he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, he thought about what the man had said about strength and sacrifice. He had never considered that someone in a wheelchair could embody such profound courage and resilience. The next day, he decided to take a step he never thought he would. He returned to the CAF, this time alone, hoping to find the man and apologize. When he arrived, the man was seated in his usual spot by the window, a book open in front of him. The young man hesitated, feeling a wave of nervousness wash over him. But then he remembered the look in the man's eyes, the calm strength that had silenced him, and he forced himself to walk over. "Hi," he said awkwardly, shifting from foot to foot. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For what I said yesterday. For everything." The man looked up from his book, studying the young man for a moment. "What made you come back?" he asked, his tone even. "I couldn't stop thinking about what you said," the young man admitted. "About strength and sacrifice. I didn't know. I didn't understand. But now. I just want you to know I'm sorry. And I want to do better." The man nodded slowly, as though weighing the sincerity of the apology. After a moment, he extended his hand. "It takes courage to admit you were wrong," he said. "That's a good start." The young man shook his hand, relief washing over him. He felt lighter, as though a burden had been lifted. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I'll try to remember what you said. About not judging people." The man smiled faintly. "That's all I can ask." Over time, the ripple effects of the encounter continued to grow. The bullies who had mocked the man began to reflect on their behavior, not just toward him but toward others as well. They started to see people differently, to consider the stories behind the faces they passed every day. It wasn't an overnight transformation, but it was a step in the right direction. The man, for his part, became something of a local legend. People began to approach him in the CAF, not out of pity but out of genuine respect and curiosity. They wanted to hear his story, to understand the man behind the Medal of Honor. And he, in turn, found himself opening up more, sharing his experiences and the lessons he had learned. He became a quiet source of inspiration for the community, a reminder that strength comes in many forms. One day, a young boy approached him with wide eyes and a notebook in hand. "Are you the man with the Medal of Honor?" the boy asked, his voice tinged with awe. The man smiled, nodding. "That's me." "Can you tell me about it?" the boy asked eagerly. "My teacher says it's for heroes." The man's smile grew warmer. "Well," he said, gesturing for the boy to sit down. "It's a long story. But if you have time, I'd be happy to share it with you." As the boy sat down and listened intently, the man realized something he hadn't before. His story, painful as it was, had the power to teach and to heal. By sharing it, he wasn't just honoring his own journey, he was helping others see the world a little differently. In the end, the man's story wasn't just about silencing bullies or proving his worth. It was about reminding everyone, including himself, that true strength lies not in appearances but in the choices we make and the impact we have on others. And as the CAF buzzed quietly around him, he felt a sense of peace, knowing that his story had become a part of something bigger, a legacy of resilience, compassion, and understanding.